I walked through my own front door at 9:30 on a Tuesday in November and found my husband sitting on the chesterfield in the living room with my younger brother on one side and our daughter on the other. My mother was perched in the wingback chair across from them, the one I bought at an estate sale in Rosedale 15 years ago. Nobody stood up. Nobody said hello. My daughter looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has come to the wrong house, and she said, "Mum, sit down. We need to have a conversation about how this is going to go." I had been driving since 5 that morning, all the way back from a forensic accounting conference in Ottawa, and the only thing I had wanted at that moment was to put my feet up and listen to my husband complain about the snow. Instead, I was looking at my brother wearing my husband's cardigan, and at my husband's hand resting on the back of the sofa behind my brother's shoulder in a way that was not the way men in our family touch each other. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I was 63 years old that night, and I had just walked into the last hour of the life I thought I was living. If you are watching from somewhere in this country or anywhere else in the world, would you do me a favor and tell me where you are in the comments? I want to know who is sitting with me tonight. I want to know I am not telling the story into the dark. The house was a brick 2-story on a quiet street in the Beaches, the kind of place where the maples turn the color of stop signs in October and the neighbors leave zucchini on each other's porches in August. My husband and I bought it in 1989 with a down payment I scraped together from 3 years of our tickling, and I had paid the mortgage off myself in 2007 with a bonus from the firm where I had made partner. My husband was an architect, a good one, technically. The kind who could draw a beautiful elevation but could not, for the life of him, read a property tax assessment. That had always been my job. Everything had always been my job. "Where is your father?" I asked my daughter. It was the first thing I said. I don't know why that was the first thing. "He's right here, Mom." "No," I said. "Where is the man I married?" My husband finally looked up at me. His face had a quality I had never seen on it before, a sort of practiced regret, like a politician apologization for something he wasn't sorry about. "Don't be dramatic," he said. "Sit down." I did not sit down. I stood in the doorway in my wool coat with the snow still melting on the shoulders, and I waited. My mother, who was 87 and had never in her life waited her turn to speak, leaned forward on her cane and said, "Your brother and your husband have been together for some time. We've all known. We've decided as a family that it would be best if you stopped pretending you didn't." My brother. My younger brother, the one I had put through trade school after our father drank himself out of work in 1978, the one I had co-signed a mortgage for in Hamilton when no bank would touch him, the one who had stood up at my wedding in a rented tuxedo and made a speech about how I had raised him more than our mother ever did. He was sitting on my chesterfield wearing a cardigan I had bought my husband for his 60th birthday, and he was looking at the carpet. "How long?" I said. "That isn't the question you should be asking," my mother said. "How long?" My husband sighed. He sighed the way you sigh at a child who is making a fuss in a restaurant. 11 years, he said. On and off. More on lately. 11 years. Our daughter had been at university when it started. Our daughter, who was now sitting on the sofa beside her father, 26 years old, a junior associate at a Bay Street firm I had personally walked her resume into. She would not look at me. "You are going to move out," my daughter said. She had a piece of paper in her lap, and she lifted it as if she had rehearsed this. "We've spoken with a lawyer. Dad is keeping the house. Uncle is moving in. Grandmother will stay in the in-law suite as she has been. We are prepared to offer you a settlement of $200,000 in exchange for an uncontested separation and a non-disclosure agreement. We think that's generous, Mum." I had paid for the in-law suite. I had paid for my mother's hip replacement in 2019 when the wait list at Sunnybrook was 18 months long and she could no longer climb the stairs in her bungalow in Scarborough. I had paid for our daughter's law school. I had paid for the new roof on this house in 2021, the roof I was standing under in my wet coat. I had paid for the cardigan. I looked at the four of them on the Chesterfield and in the wingback, and what I felt was not what I would have expected to feel. I expected rage. I expected rage. I expected grief. What I felt instead was a sudden, almost mathematical clarity, as if a long column of figures I had been adding up wrong for 38 years had just resolved itself into a different sum. "All right," I said. My daughter looked relieved. My husband looked smug. My mother nodded, satisfied, and reached for her tea. All right, what, Mum? All right, I heard you. I turned around and walked back out the front door. I did not take off my coat. I did not pick up the overnight bag I had set down in the foyer. I had my purse on my shoulder still, and my car keys in my hand, and I walked back out into the November night and got into my Subaru and pulled out of my own driveway. I drove east on Queen Street with no destination. The snow had started to come down properly, the heavy, wet kind we get in November before the lake freezes. My phone was lighting up on the passenger seat. I let it ring. By the time I got to Coxwell, I had counted 32 missed calls. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of a Tim Hortons near Birchmount, I had counted 91. I sat in the car with the engine running and the heat on full, and I watched the steam rise off my coat sleeves, and I tried to think. I was a forensic accountant. I had spent 35 years finding money that people didn't want found. I had testified in court against 2 CFOs of publicly traded companies. I had once traced a $6 million embezzlement scheme through 14 shell corporations in 3 jurisdictions. And I had not noticed in 11 years that my husband and my brother were carrying on under my own roof. I went inside the Tim Hortons and I ordered a small double-double and a sour cream glazed donut. And I sat in a corner booth with my back to the window and I started to think the way I think when I am working. Coldly, in categories. What did I have? I had my purse, my keys, my phone, my coat, and the clothes I was standing in. I had a corporate credit card from the firm, which I would not use for personal expenses. I had a personal Visa with a $5,000 limit. I had a checking account at TD with about $1,100 in it, because I had moved most of my liquid savings into a joint account with my husband 2 years ago when we had been talking about buying a cottage in Muskoka. The cottage we had never bought. I checked the joint account. It was at zero. Not a dollar, not a penny. $347,000 had been transferred out of it on the 17th of November 2 days ago, while I was in Ottawa explaining bank fraud to a room full of articling students. The recipient account was numbered. I did not recognize it. My husband was an architect. He did not know how to do this. He could not have done this alone. I opened my email on my phone and I scrolled. I had 3,400 unread messages from work. I scrolled past them. I was looking for personal mail, and what I found in a folder I had not opened in months was an email from my mother's lawyer, dated October of last year, addressed to my husband, copied to my brother, and forwarded to my daughter. The subject line was Estate Planning, Confidential. The body of the email said, "Per our discussion, the trust amendments are ready for signature. Please confirm timing once she has signed the cottage paperwork." I had never signed any cottage paperwork. There had never been any cottage. I had been told for 2 years that we were saving for one. I sat in that Tim Hortons until 11 o'clock at night, and I read every email in that thread, and by the time I was done, my coffee was cold and my hands had stopped shaking, and I knew 3 things for certain. The first was that my husband and my brother had been moving money out of our joint accounts and into a number company in Bermuda for at least 4 years. The second was that my mother had amended her will to remove me as executor and primary beneficiary and to leave the entirety of her estate, which was not small, to my daughter with my brother as trustee. The third was that my daughter had known about all of it since at least last spring, when she had been articling at the very firm that drafted the trust amendments. I bought another coffee. I needed to think about where I was going to sleep. I could not go to a hotel because I did not want to leave a paper trail. I could not go to a friend because most of my friends were also friends with my husband, and I did not yet know which ones knew what. I had a sister in Halifax who had been estranged from her mother for 30 years over something I had always assumed was my mother's fault, and now suspected was not. But Halifax was a flight away, and I was not ready to leave the city. I drove to a motel on Kingston Road, the kind with a vacancy sign that buzzes, and I paid $42 in cash for a room with a kettle and a sagging double bed. The night clerk did not look at my driver's license. I sat on the bed in my coat and I cried for about 10 minutes, the kind of crying that is more about the body needing to do it than about any particular thought. Then I stopped, and I went and washed my face in the bathroom sink, and I sat down at the little laminate desk by the window, and I opened my phone. I did not call anyone. I did not text anyone. I opened a notes app and I started writing down everything I knew, every account number I could remember, every name, every date. I worked until 4 in the morning. When I finally lay down, I slept for 2 hours. Hard, the way I used to sleep in our tickling. When I woke up, the snow had stopped and the sun was coming up over the lake, and I knew what I was going to do. The first thing I did was call a colleague named Francis Beaulieu at a firm in Montreal. Francis and I had gone to law school together at McGill in the 80s, and she had defended me in 1996 when I had been wrongly named in a tax matter that had nearly ended my career. She owed me nothing. I had owed her everything for almost 30 years. She picked up on the second ring. It is 6 a.m. I know. What is wrong? I told her. I told her in the flat clinical way I tell things to other lawyers, with dates and amounts and the names of the institutions involved. She did not interrupt. When I was done, she was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "Get yourself to Montreal. Drive. Don't fly. I will have a place for you to stay tonight. Do not contact anyone in your family. Do not respond to your firm. I will handle your firm." I drove to Montreal. It took me 5.5 hours on the 401. I stopped at a service center near Kingston and bought a burner phone with cash and a change of clothes at a Mark's workwear house. I ate a sandwich I do not remember eating. By supper time, I was sitting in Frances's kitchen in Outremont, and she was pouring me a glass of red wine and putting a plate of cassoulet in front of me, and her wife was running a bath upstairs. I stayed in Montreal for 11 days. In those 11 days, Frances and I built what she called the architecture. She was a securities lawyer with a forensic background, and between the two of us, we knew more about hidden money than almost anyone in the country. We mapped every transfer, every signature, every email. We pulled my husband's professional incorporation records. We pulled my brother's. We pulled the records of the numbered company in Bermuda, and we found the Canadian directors of record, and one of them was a name I recognized. A man my husband had gone to architecture school with in the 70s who had been disciplined twice by the Ontario College of Architects for financial irregularities. We found that my husband had been billing personal expenses to his firm for years, not small ones. A condominium in a building near Yorkville that I had never heard of. A car. Trips to Lisbon and to Provincetown that had been written down as continuing professional development. We found that my brother had been listed as a consultant on 3 of my husband's larger commercial projects in Mississauga and had been paid $260,000 over 4 years for work I was certain he had not done. Because my brother had been a millwright before he retired and could no more consult on a commercial build than I could fly a plane. We found something else too, something I had not been looking for. My husband, 2 years ago, had taken out a $500,000 line of credit secured against our house. My name was on it. The signature was not mine. I sat at Frances's kitchen table when I saw that, and I put my forehead down on the wood and I did not move for a long time. Frances put her hand on my shoulder. "Forgery is a criminal matter," she said. "Not just a civil one. I know what forgery is, Frances. I am saying it because I think you have been treating this as a divorce. It is not a divorce. It is not a divorce. It is a fraud." She was right. I had been treating it as a divorce because that is the lens my husband had handed me, with our daughter sitting beside him on the chesterfield holding her piece of paper. They had wanted me to fight for assets and visitation and the names on the deed. They had wanted me on the divorce battlefield because that was a battlefield they could see. I had been fighting on the wrong field. On the 12th day, I drove back to Toronto. I did not go home. I went to the offices of a lawyer Frances had recommended, a woman in her 50s named who had spent 10 years as a Crown prosecutor before going into private practice. And I retained her for $1, the way you do when you want a privileged conversation on the record. Then I went to a hotel in Yorkville under a name that was not quite my own, and I waited. I waited because I needed my husband and my brother to do one more thing. I needed them to spend the money. While money sits in a numbered account in Bermuda, it is hard to recover. While money is moving, it leaves a trace. And my husband and my brother, I knew, were not going to be able to sit on $347,000 and a forged $500,000 line of credit. They had been living a life. They were going to keep living it. I had my colleague's office quietly subpoena the bank records for the line of credit. I had a former student of mine who now worked at the Ontario Securities Commission look at my husband's billing practices due his firm. I had Frances in Montreal file a sealed motion in the Superior Court of Ontario freezing the joint account, the line of credit, and any further transfers. None of this was visible from the outside. From the outside, I was a woman who had vanished after a quarrel with her family. My husband and my daughter were calling me twice an hour and I was not answering. My mother had stopped calling on the 5th day, which told me my mother knew that something was happening that she could not control. On the 18th day, I sent one email. It was to my daughter. It said, "I would like to meet you for coffee. Just the two of us. I will not bring a lawyer. I would like you to come alone." I gave her the name of a second cup on Bloor Street and a time the next morning. She came. She came alone, the way I had asked. She was wearing the camel coat I had bought her for her call to the bar. She sat down across from me and her hands were shaking, and I saw, for the first time since the night on the Chesterfield, that my daughter was not a confident young lawyer executing a family decision. My daughter was a frightened 26-year-old who had been pulled into something by people she trusted and who was beginning to suspect she had made a mistake she could not take back. "Mum," she said. "Don't," I said. "Just listen for a moment." I did not yell at her. I did not cry. I told her, calmly and without elaboration, what I had found. I told her about the line of credit with the forged signature. I told her about the numbered company. I told her about the consulting fees paid to her uncle for work he had not done. I told her that what she had been told was a divorce was a federal-level financial crime, and that her name appeared on 3 pieces of correspondence with her grandmother's lawyer that, depending on how a Crown attorney chose to read them, could put her in front of the Law Society for a hearing she would not survive. "I did not know," she whispered. "Mum, I did not know about the line of credit. I did not know about the company. Grandmother said it was just an estate matter. Dad said you and he were going to separate amicably. He said you knew. He said you were tired of pretending." "I know you did not know everything," I said, "but you knew enough. You knew enough that when I walked into my own house on a Tuesday night, you read me a piece of paper from the Chesterfield." She started to cry. People at other tables were looking. I did not soften. "I am going to tell you what is going to happen," I said. "In the next several days, the joint account is going to be frozen. The line of credit is going to be flagged. Your father and your uncle are going to be notified that they are subjects of a forensic review by the OSC and a parallel inquiry into the line of credit signature. Your grandmother's trust amendments are going to be challenged in court because they were procured under undue influence. None of this is going to be quiet. None of this is going to be private." "What do you want me to do?" she said. "I want you to think very carefully about whether you would like to be a witness or a defendant. You have one chance to choose." I left her at the table. I paid for both coffees on the way out. She called me the next morning at 6. She said she would be a witness. The freeze order landed on a Friday. My husband was served at his architecture office in front of a junior partner and a draftsman and a receptionist who had worked for him for 12 years. My brother was served at the bungalow in Hamilton, where he was, I was told later, eating a bowl of cereal in his pajamas. The line of credit was flagged that same day, and the bank's fraud unit, which had been quietly cooperating with my lawyer for a week, opened a formal file. My mother found out by phone from my husband while she was watching her programs in the in-law suite. She had a small stroke that evening, not a fatal one, the kind that takes the use of a hand and leaves the mind sharp enough to understand what has been lost. I did not go to the hospital. My daughter did. My daughter sat with her grandmother in a room at Toronto General and listened to my mother say in a slurred voice that I had always been a cold girl, that I had always been an ungrateful girl, that this was what came of letting daughters go to law school. My daughter, to her credit, told me afterwards that she had not said a word in response. She had just held her grandmother's good hand until the nurse came in to take vitals, and then she had left. The criminal charges came in March. My husband and the man he had gone to architecture school with were charged with fraud, over $5,000, forgery, and uttering a forged document. My brother was charged with fraud and conspiracy. The Bermuda money, all $347,000 of it, had been moved twice while we waited, and we had traced it both times. It was repatriated under a court order in February. The trial took 14 months. I sat through every day of it. I gave evidence over 4 full days, and on the 3rd day, my husband, on the advice of new counsel, attempted to introduce the argument that I had known about the transfers all along and had consented tacitly. His own lawyer abandoned the argument by lunch. He was convicted on all counts in June of the following year and sentenced to 4 years at Beaver Creek. My brother got 2 years less a day, served provincially. The architect from the 70s, the one with the prior college discipline, got 3. The civil matters were quieter and longer. The line of credit was discharged because the signature was not mine. The joint account funds were returned. The cottage paperwork that had never existed was used in court as evidence of the long pattern of deception. I retained the house and the beaches, free and clear. I retained my pension. I retained, the court found, every single dollar that had ever passed through my hands, because every single dollar had been earned by my hands. My mother died on a Sunday in October, 18 months after her stroke. Her will, as it had been amended, was challenged successfully on grounds of undue influence. She had, in her last 6 weeks, asked to see me 3 times. I went once. She did not apologize. She told me, in the careful, slow speech the stroke had left her with, that she had always thought I would be the one who could carry the family, and that she had not realized until very recently that carrying a family was not the same as being loved by it. It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever heard her make. I held her hand for about 10 minutes, and then I left, and I did not go back. My daughter and I are slowly rebuilding. She testified honestly at the trial. She left Bay Street and now works for a clinic that defends tenants against bad faith evictions. She makes a fraction of what she made before. She did not ask for help, and I did not offer any, and I think that is the most respect we have ever shown each other. We have lunch every second Sunday at a place on Danforth Avenue. We do not talk about her father. We do talk, sometimes, about her grandmother. We are figuring out what we are now to each other. It is slow. I sold the house and the beaches last year. I bought a smaller one in Prince Edward County near the lake, with a porch that catches the morning sun and a kitchen big enough to put a table in. I have a spaniel now, a rescue from a shelter in Belleville, and we walk along the dunes most mornings. I have started teaching 2 days a week at a law school in Kingston. I tell my students, all of them women, all of them younger than my daughter, the same thing on the first day of every term. I tell them that in this work, the most dangerous people are not the ones who lie to your face. The most dangerous people are the ones who let you keep believing what you already wanted to believe. I tell them to watch the people who never seem to ask the obvious question. I tell them that in any system, including a family, the person who is doing all the carrying is the person who is being lied to most. I am 66 years old now. I sleep without medication. I eat 3 meals a day. I have made 2 new friends in the county, both of them women in their 70s who have their own stories. And we do not pry, and we do not hurry. The first frost came last week, and I went out to the garden and pulled the last of the tomatoes off the vine, and the dog ran ahead of me down to the water, and the lake was the color of pewter, and the geese were going over the house in long, ragged vises. And I stood in my own yard, on my own land, paid for by my own work, and I was, for the first time in a very long time, exactly where I was supposed to be. If you have made it to the end of this, thank you. Thank you for sitting with me. I want to say one thing before I go. If there is someone in your life who has been telling you for years that you are the strong one, the responsible one, the one who can handle it, please look very carefully at what you are handling and at who is handing it to you. Strong is not the same as alone. Responsible is not the same as exploited. Family is not always the people you were born to. Family is the people who, when you walk through the door at 9:30 on a Tuesday night, stand up. They stand up and they take your coat. And they ask you how the drive was. Tell me in the comments, if you would, where you are watching from and whether there is someone in your life who has stood up when you walked through the door. I read every comment. I will be here. I have thought a great deal, in the years since that Tuesday night, about how I did not see it. I was a forensic accountant. Finding hidden things was my actual profession. And yet for 11 years I sat across the breakfast table from a man who was emptying my life into a numbered account, and I did not see it. Not because I was stupid, because I did not want to. That is the part I want you to hear, if you hear nothing else. The mind protects what the heart has already chosen. My husband, my brother, my mother, even my daughter for a time, were each counting on a particular piece of me to keep believing what I already wanted to believe, that my husband loved me in his quiet way, that my brother was grateful for what I had done for him, that my mother, in her sharp, imperfect way, was proud. None of those things were true. They had not been true for a long time. But I had built my whole adult life on the assumption that they were, and a life is a heavy thing to take apart. What I have come to understand is that being the strong one in a family is not a virtue if the strength is being used against you. Carrying people is a gift when they are walking beside you. It is something else entirely when they are riding on your back and steering. The difference, I think, is whether they ever ask how the load feels. Nobody in that house had asked me how the load felt in 38 years. I want to say something about strength, because that word has been weaponized against women like me my entire life. Strength is not the ability to absorb whatever is done to you. Strength is the willingness, when the truth finally lands on the kitchen table, to look at it, not to look away, not to soften it, not to ask whether anyone else would prefer you keep pretending. To look at it and to act on what you see, even when acting on it costs you the people you thought you could not live without. I lost my mother twice, the night on the Chesterfield and again the Sunday she died. I lost my husband and my brother to a courtroom and to their own choices. I almost lost my daughter, and the only reason I did not is that when I gave her the chance to choose differently, she did. That choice was hers. I could not have made it for her. What I could do, and what I did, was refuse to keep paying for choices that were not mine. If you are watching this and there is a quiet voice somewhere in you that has been asking for a long time whether the people around you are actually with you, please listen to that voice. It is not paranoia. It is the part of you that still knows the truth, even when the rest of you has agreed to forget it. Trust it. Look at the bank statements. Read the emails. Ask the obvious question. And if you do not like the answer, do not punish yourself for the years you spent not asking. You were doing the best you could with the love you were given. You can do better now with the love you give yourself.